Welcome to my guests and to all of you out there tuning in for the second episode of Anything and Everything. I truly appreciate your support. I'm your host, Halima Sharif. I'm thrilled to invite some wonderful guests to my show, Sir Edward Kidd Jordan and his lovely daughter, Rachel Jordan. I have literally known this family my entire life. Mr. Jordan and my father go way back. But let me share some background information. Internationally acclaimed saxophonist legend Sir Edward Kidd Jordan is one of the true master improvisers who still performs at the age of 85. Born in Crowley, Louisiana, according to Indie Jazz, Jordan is probably the single most underdocumented jazz musician of his generation, though one of the busiest in the world. A multi-reedist, he plays the baritone, soprano, C melody, and sopranino saxophones, as well as the contrabass and bass clarinet. For more than 50 years, he has shared his gifts and passion for music. An educator, after 34 years, in 2006, Mr. Jordan retired as the chairman of the Jazz Studies program at Southern University in New Orleans. Notably, he continues to serve as the artistic director of the Louis Satchmo Armstrong Summer Jazz Camp since its 1995 inception. Mr. Jordan holds a bachelor's degree from Southern University and a master's in music from Millikan University, and attended postgraduate summer studies at Northwestern University, where he studied with Dr. Frederick Hemke. On May 13, 2017, Mr. Jordan received an honorary Doctor of Music from Loyola University. In 1985, the French Ministry of Culture recognized him as a Knight Chevalier of the Ordre des Arts et des Lettres. Okay, yeah, I took a little French. The nation's highest artistic honor given by the French government. He earned 2 Lifetime Achievement Awards, one from Offbeat Magazine, their first, for music education, and from the Vision Festival 13 in New York City. The Jazz Journalists Association awarded Mr. Jordan their 2013 Jazz Hero Award. His music contributions have also documented on CBS 60 Minutes. Mr. Jordan is most proud as a husband to Edward Chatters Jordan and father to Edward Jr. Kent, Christy, Paul, Stephanie, Rachel, and Marlon. 4 are accomplished professional musicians: Kent, Stephanie, Rachel, and Marlon. And today we have his lovely daughter, Rachel, with us. Rachel Jordan is an acclaimed classical violinist. She received her Bachelor of Music and Master of Music from the Peabody Conservatory of the Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, where she studied with Earl Sinofsky. Rachel has performed with her siblings for Jazz at Lincoln Center Higher Ground Hurricane Relief Benefit Concert, as well as numerous concerts throughout the United States. She has been a featured performer in numerous solo recitals, most notably the Kennedy Center, the Mozart Festival in Salzburg, Austria, the Music Center of Houston, the Mozart Festival in Washington, D.C. She performed the Lark Ascending with Jackson State University Orchestra for the Congressional Black Caucus inaugural ceremony for President Barack Obama. She's a member of the River Oaks Chamber Orchestra in Houston, Texas, the James Carter Quartet at Loyola University. She has served as professor of violin at Jackson State University, adjunct professor, faculty at Xavier University, my alma mater, Southern University, and Dillard University in New Orleans. Rachel was also a member of the Louisiana Philharmonic Orchestra in New Orleans for 12 years. Rachel started the Jesse Dent Recital Series at Dillard University, which features African-American musicians performing classical music. She is the founding director and artistic director of the Music Alive Ensemble, a classical and jazz ensemble of musicians, composers, and arrangers. Welcome, welcome, welcome to this lovely family. I'm so happy to have you both on the show.
Thank you for having us, Halima.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Very happy to be here.
I'm happy to see you all again. It's been a long time, Mr. Jordan. I think the last time I saw you was in 2017 at Loyola University, where my little nephew Jamil was performing.
Oh, okay.
I saw you and your lovely wife. But I got a couple of questions, of course. You know, Mr. Jordan, you've been around for forever, and you've had one heck of a legacy. How did you get started in the music industry? You know, who would you say some of your influencers were?
Well, as a young kid, there was a teacher that named Professor Auger. He was a Frenchman. And he taught all the blacks and whites. We hadn't integrated yet. He taught all the blacks and the whites. And he was married to a white French lady. That was unusual back then too. He even lived across in the white section, and his daughter was a black school. But he taught all the young musicians down there, and he seemed to take interest in me because I would practice. The majority of the students who went to him, I mean, students are, he always tell me, there's one thing, I know you coming with your lesson, and I would come with it. So he made me practice by telling me that, by pushing me. That I know you practice this week. And I was doing a lot of practicing. So that's the way that was. And sometimes if I didn't have the money to pay it, they don't worry about that. Just come on in. Because money was tight. My father had passed, and my mother was the only one living. But he took care of me also. That's the way that went.
Wow, I'm just thinking back to that time, compared to where we are today. Um, how was it for up and coming musicians, when you think about now we're in 2020 and considering what's been happening in our nation as it relates to race relations, you've seen many challenging times. Um, you've lived through the eras of civil rights with Dr. King, Malcolm X. How would you compare back then to now as it relates to your personal views as well as a musician?
Well, it looked like things were better. For some people, it was much better. Because we had integrated bands back then. Where we came from, sometimes you couldn't tell the blacks from the whites because they're Creole. And the Creoles, if they wanted to be black, they'd be black. If they wanted to be white on a certain occasion, they would be white. So they just went along with it. But look back after they started dealing with the different political angles, that's when it really got kind of messed up. But before they had the politics into it, I knew a lot of people that they wasn't passing, we say they passed, but it used it to their advantage.
Mhm.
But it could go in certain places and it could do certain things. And sometimes people would send them in the place, go get this for me. They're not going to worry about you. Because at that time around Crowley and Lafayette and Opelousas, I had people in my family who would come to visit us, and we didn't know. I remember when I was a kid, I used to say, "Mother, look at all those white people." Boy, shut up, that's your kinfolk. I said, "What? Can that be my kinfolk? That's your kinfolk." And you be cool, don't be through with all of that. And they'd go on and do what they did. So it was a common thing in some families who had what they call passe blondes.
Mm-hmm.
Passe blondes in the family. So that's the way it was.
Rachel,
Yes.
your father is amazing, and you already know that. And you and your siblings pretty much grew up in a household your entire life of musicians, like I did. My dad,
Right. I was about to say you did the same.
and I felt like, being in a house with my father, whose grandfather taught him and whose cousins and all. I'm like, well, you can't escape it. It's
Right.
not only a part of your DNA, but it's a part of your exposure. How was that coming up for you and your siblings? I felt like it was mandated that we played an instrument. I played the piano, Jamil played the trumpet, and it's like we all picked an instrument. How was that at home for you all with your dad?
Well, I mean, my dad is the first person to say that. He discouraged us from becoming musicians, but I don't think so. I think that my dad has had a great life in music. And personally, for me, I have had a wonderful, fantastic life in music. I don't know myself from not wanting to ever play the violin. That's the only thing I ever wanted to do. And so, like for you, you hear, I heard Kent practicing all day. I mean, Kent is the practicer. in the house. My brother Paul played violin, and I was always disgusted with him because, you know, he was better than I was, but he was also 4 years older than I was. But I didn't consider that, you know, at that time, because I just knew that I wanted to play violin and I wanted to play like better than him, even though he was older. You know, and so, you know, everybody at some point played an instrument and was actually, you know, proficient on it. I mean, everybody has played an instrument in our family, even though they're not professional musicians. So, you know, for me, I think, you know, as a musician, I think, you know, very, very early on that this is what you want to do. And I knew probably at 3 years old, my story is that, you know, my daddy, I told my mom and them I wanted you know, you see how New Orleans I am. I told my mama and them that I wanted I wanted a violin. I wanted a violin. And so they bought me this toy violin, and I played the strings off of the violin, and I thought I was going to get in trouble. So I hid it under the dresser in our room. You know, we had the girls' room, the boys' room. You know, those are the old days, girls' room, boys' room. And so I was so afraid, but then I was like, well, you know what? I really want to play this violin. So I played the strings off of this little fake violin. And then I told my dad, me being, you know, me, I was like, Dad, that was a fake violin. Now I want a real one. So they were like, okay, she really does want a real violin. So that's my story. So, you know, I think the calling comes from within. I mean, of course, you know, like you hear your mom, my mama plays piano. So my mama's playing piano. Everybody around me is doing something or singing or doing something. My dad's, you know, always practicing. Now that's another person like Ken who practiced. If he's not talking, he's practicing, right? So, you know, and then my mother's family is the Chatters family, which is another big, you know, family of music. So all of them played, and she plays, and so, you know, like growing up, my aunt Wileen was my accompanist for all my competitions and all of the lessons and every other thing. So, you know, so it was just kind of like a thing that was always around you. And I know you experienced the same thing, that New Orleans has all of these families, right. And all of these families have like their grandma, grandpa, cousin, you know, daddy, uncle, mama, auntie. They all at some point knew or were exposed to music on a real level. So you knew the upper level and you knew the lower level of what it meant to be a musician. And I always aspired to be a musician on the highest level that I could be.
You know, that's beautiful. I mean, I always believe, you know, just growing up in a musical family, that the music helps all of us to connect our humanity, you know.
Definitely.
You know, and no matter what the genre is, it connects our humanity. And so when I look at your family, I look at my family, you mentioned about your mom, you know, the Chatters family. You know, my mother wasn't a musician, but she sang. You know, she was a registered nurse, but she had a beautiful voice. But, you know, she married into the family that just loved music, and it just came naturally to all of us. You know, Mr. Jordan, how was that with your children? Even though Rachel, you said he didn't really force y'all, but it kind of felt like you just fell in line with it like we did. You know, we just never, I think when I think about the four of us, we could have gone further, but Jamil is the one that continued. You know, Jamil was the one that continued professionally. I think if I had continued playing the piano, I probably would have done the same thing. I just prefer PR, and I prefer promoting everybody for the most part. But Mr. Jordan, how did you feel with your children? You know, following in your footsteps, you and your wife with the journey. How important is that legacy?
Oh, I felt good about it because they were serious.
Yes.
If they hadn't been serious, I would have discouraged them from playing. But Rachel wanted to play, was the name by Rachel and Kent. Those two really wanted to play. I had a son that played violin named Paul. If he had really wanted to, he would have been a hell of a musician. But he stopped. Stopped along the way. He can still play now if he wanted, but he stopped. If I was judging by talent, he might have been the most talented one as a kid. But I'm one of them that let a person do what they want to do. If you want to
What
rock.
about Marlon, though, Dad? What about Marlon? Marlon, I thought, was one of the most talented kids I ever saw.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. Marlon could play.
Oh, that's funny.
Marlon could play as a kid, but Paul could play when he was much younger than Marlon, and he was more serious about it than Marlon at that age. But you have to let a person do what they want to do, you know, and they do what they want to do. They do it, and you feel better about it because they come up and say, "Well, you pushed me to do this. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to do that," because I knew if you didn't love the instrument, if you didn't love music, you weren't going to deal with it. You had to love that instrument just like you loved it. And I think you loved it more than any of us. Tell the truth.
Oh no, this is the only thing for me.
Hmm. Really?
Yeah.
So has
Yeah.
it always been the violin for you, Rachel?
Yeah.
Only. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can play other instruments. I mean, I know how to play a little bit of piano and I can play a little bit of cello. And I mean, I'm sure, if given anything, you can figure it out. But I can actually play through a Bach suite on cello, and I can play some Bach on the piano because I went to conservatory. So it was mandatory that everybody, take lessons. My friend, Tina Dahl, who's my roommate, who is a fantastic pianist, was actually my teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was always saying, wow, you really do love to play piano. And I'm like, I do, but even loving that, I know that, violin is it for me in terms of how I hear sound and how I think about life. It's from that perspective for sure.
I'm a piggyback a bit. You, Mr. Jordan, you were considered a legend in avant-garde jazz circles. And as we mentioned earlier in the bio, you have been given France's highest cultural honor. Would you mind telling everybody about that? When you think about the ties to New Orleans and the ties to the music industry itself.
Well, saxophone is a French instrument.
Mm-hmm.
It came into being with the Frenchmen. And as a kid, the great classical saxophone players were Frenchmen. They got a saxophone player over there named Fred Hemke. He was one of them. Sigurd Rascher was another.
Mm-hmm.
Sigurd Rascher was before him and Fred Hemke. But in order to play what I wanted to do, I just didn't want to play jazz. I wanted to play classical music. I wanted to play like Ornette Coleman and Charlie Parker. So with all of that, I had to come up with something. And I tried all of it. But Ornette Coleman, if the way I play, jazz, my jazz playing is more spontaneous. Something going on. Something going wrong. I hear something in the back.
So it's a little bit unstable. Just the connections sometimes.
Yeah, it's okay.
The way I hear jazz is different rather from the average person. Because when I heard Ornette Coleman,
Mm-hmm.
I knew jazz was in a different. When I was coming up as a kid, I was nursing Charlie Parker and some of those French jazz players. I stayed with the classical jazz people and Charlie Parker. And later on, I stayed with the classical people and started listening on that Coleman. And that was down here for a minute. So you have a large plate to choose from. And I decided that I wanted to mix it together. In jazz, as far as I'm concerned, jazz, a lot of people imitate it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to try to do another thing. I wanted to play continuously while the harmonic, they came up with what they call harmonic. Instead of playing a harmony, instead of playing a melody, you play along with both of them as you can. And I'm still doing that. When I'm playing, I listen to the melody as well as the harmony. Some people just only play the harmony and they put whatever they want with the melody. But I prefer melody, like sometimes people, man, I heard you was playing this. I mean, throw spiritual or something in there, you know, some kind of thing that people can identify with. But it's basically because I have all those different little melodies that they come in my mind, and they fit along with the harmony. Now, if they didn't fit with the harmony, I wouldn't play. I mean, it's a thing that you have to listen carefully for, because they come and you can't stop from doing it. I mean, sometimes I say, I'm just going to play something odd, and when some of them things hit me, I got to play the melody along with the harmonic structure that they play. So it's a part, I call it like it's a part of the melody and the harmony. You always have to be conscious that both of them is going along at the same time. And sometimes I play 2 or 3 licks of maybe anything, a spiritual music, I mean, blasting, and all those periods, the harmony tune, the play spirit, play a spiritual. I'm trying to mix it up, you know, because it's all music, you know, and you can't go in, if you go in and only play one thing, that means you're playing by almost like rope. You know, you got it done. But when I'm playing, anything may come out. Sometimes I surprise myself. Say, where did that come from? I heard that 10 years ago. You know, and it's just out there. And somebody who can hear know that that's the melody or the harmony that goes together. I can't really explain it to a non-musician, but a musician, some musician. Man, I heard you playing that. I said, that's right. The melody brought me to the harmony, or sometimes the harmony bring me to the melody. So either left hand or the right hand, they're still together. And sometimes people who know and can hear say, man, that sure was, I haven't read that lick. And sometimes I've read the lick over and over because that's what I'm hearing. And you got to hear. Now, some people go in a recording session and have everything down like a classical musician. The only difference is that they're not reading. They got it down where they can play it. But classical musicians are reading what they're doing, playing the same thing. So when I go in, I don't want to know what key. I got at least 25 records. I couldn't tell you what key they are. To go in and start playing. I don't want to know the key because that's part of the challenge. To go in and read your way through. And what I call it, it's music. But if I had it all wrapped up in a little package, I wouldn't consider that too much. I mean, I got it down like I'm playing really classical. And Onion Coleman told me that. He said, man, sometimes things come out of you I haven't heard in 30 years. Well, that's a part of my, I heard it when I was a kid. So it just comes, just automatically come out. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And when I'm hearing, you know, and growing up with a bunch of jazz musicians, especially, it's always been very spiritual to me. You know, whenever I hear, you know, improvisation, I hear the collaboration, I hear all the instruments coming together, you know, it awakens that spirit within. And so when you close, you know, jazz and music, especially jazz, okay, I'm being pretty.
Yeah.
I can understand you because you come out of one of them families.
Yeah, well, and it just hit you.
You go back and play something 30 years ago. Really, I've heard him do some things, and it sounds like it just, it's the man where it come from. Don't worry about it, thinking I got it. And boy, he would be playing, man, what you, don't worry, them old men used to play that, but he would modernize it and be going along. And I really heard him when he was young, boy, your daddy was terrible. And terrible, I'm telling you. And he would talk to us after the gig was over, talk to us and eat everything we had to eat.
Yeah, he could eat, man.
And Bubba was gullible.
Boy, y'all wrong. Y'all wrong.
Funny.
You knew he was gullible. I mean, him would be making up stuff and then, give me something, give me. he was a hell of a man, okay. But he could always play. Could read, could solo, could do everything. I mean, that's the way it was.
You know, speaking of my father, you know, you all go way back. You
That's
know,
right.
we're talking about the world-renowned trumpet player Emory Humphrey Thompson, Umar
Mhm.
Sharik. You know, when did you and my dad actually meet each other? And how did you both impact each other's lives? I know you
I,
got stories.
I, met him, I met him when I was in high school. He
Okay.
was at Southern Inn, and you couldn't, he was his presence. And then my teacher that taught me was in college with him. That's the second connection. Then he came back and was in school with us. So all the way, I knew him like, when I got to Southern, I knew him like he was a grandpa or something. And we was following him around. And look, he knew he had us because he'd be talking to us. Well, give me some of that chicken, boy. You know how he was. If you're talking to us, and he, give me some of that, give me some. And keep us as if he was full. All right, I'm ready to go. I mean, he always had his game. And he was like that. And all the youngsters would gather around just to listen to how he was, because he was there when he had been to school 2 or 3 times. He had been. Then he would come to a loud Hampton and in a different band. And Howard Baptiste was staying in Baton Rouge. One time he came too. He had to stay at Alvin House because he washed his clothes. And that was a kicks on that time. And he was laying up in the bed all covered up. Stick with me, let's talk. Charles, where are you going? So he washed his clothes and they had him all lined out. And he put on his clothes. I'm ready to go now. Oh, I see what it is. That's your clothes, Lord. He put lined out. And all his uniform and all that. You knew he had a game with it. And in fact, I used to see him, he said, well, you got another game in order to make another game. But he was, one thing I knew about your father, he was the best player in every band that I ever been played with. Loud Hampton, Count Bass, whoever he was with, one of the best players. And everybody knew that. And that's what.
Ain't that something, girl?
They could play classical music as well as play jazz. I remember one time he was in school and he had to play a class. He had to come back to play a classical solo. He had left. And the man said, I'm not going to pass it, you know. He came back and played the solo, but I had so much. And he went on and passed the schools. Hell of a man, boy. I'm telling you.
Yeah, he had one heck of a history. You know, I think about the stories that my father have told me about, you know, his relationship with you, his relationship with Mr. Baptiste, and just so many great, you know. Every time I see you, and I know whenever my brother runs into you, you know, we just can't stop cracking up laughing because you all got so many crazy stories. One of the things I want to ask you, you know, as you speak on my father, and I think about your contributions to not only New Orleans but to the world, but I know it's been noted by many that my father brought bebop to New Orleans. Would you expound on that?
Well, yeah, well, he was one of the first bop players down there. And he was playing in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Because he left New Orleans early and got on the bop scene with all them bands they had around New York. You're right, he came back. And the thing about your daddy, he could play the solos like them people. Plus he could read. A lot of people couldn't read music. And they learned it off the record. But he could read, he'd get in that Auburn method book. Let's go, turn in the page, let's go. Let's start playing. And he'd shake clarinet players up. I mean, your father was a hell of a musician. So that was the thing that I knew. Good musicians had to learn how to develop the ear and had to learn how to read music. And he got me into some of the white bands in New Orleans. Now I know there's nobody like that can play this music. He called me Thicket can play it. He called me Thicket. And he helped get me into some of them top-notch white bands because they didn't know I could read music like that. So he helped get me into
That's
something.
interesting.
And
That's
it,
right. He was one
Hmm.
of the first ones to say, I know somebody out there. Come on, Thicket. You know, you can play clarinet. See, the thing about a saxophone player, you got to play clarinet, saxophone, and flute. Get
mhm.
your flute and practice. And after I got the flute down, come on, you can play all the parts. And he got me in some of those bands. The demonstrate he can play, I know he can play. That's right. Never, never forget that man.
Yeah. What are some of, and this question is posed at you and Rachel. What are some of your most fond memories as it relates to your family, as well as other musicians that you perform with, those who are here or who are no longer with us?
Alvin,
You
Alvin,
go ahead, Dad.
Alvin Baptiste married my sister-in-law, and he and Emory was in school together also.
Hmm.
So I would say Alvin Baptiste, the line that I would have, Alvin knew Emory before me. So Emory influenced Alvin, Alvin influenced me, and then I went on to influence some of the other kids.
Wow.
It's a line. It's a line that we do, and then we would look out for one another's kids, other people that we knew, in order to do some certain things in music. That's the line I would deal with. Yeah,
I mean, I'm going to piggyback off of that because a lot of my friends from Peabody are always, asking me different kind of questions because, here I'm studying classical music, but I come from a big jazz family, right? And
Mhm.
at that moment, my brother Marlon and Kent were both signed with CBS Records, and they were a part of that whole stable that was pulled out of New Orleans. All of these people like Branford Winton and the whole like. So while I was there, they would always come and play in Baltimore. So I saw them constantly. They would, do pickup games and different things like, Winton, and my brother would come into town and my friends would always like, be like in awe of it. And, for me, it was just like, okay, we grew up with these people and of course they're going to come and, say hi and do whatever. But I actually remember before everybody hit it and, made it, I told Miss Basil this. I remember everybody playing in the park, in Jackson Square, where everybody, all the families were poor together and struggling together, but everybody would come, together with their families, and we'd all be sitting there listening to Jermaine Basil or listening to your dad or Mr. Marsalis, and it was like one of those kinds of things. Definitely with my Uncle Alvin. I remember the day that he came to Mildred Osborne, and he did one of these seminars, and I was like shocked. Oh my God, that's my uncle. And sometimes you don't want to pick out that's your niece or whatever. So he just comes over and he says, "That's my niece, and she plays violin." And everybody knew that because I was, we had a good program, and he was doing some stuff that he had learned once he had come from Africa, and even to this day, like I hear in my mind, he had this rhythm, and so even though he's my uncle, but he was giving this seminar
Yeah.
on African music and how it related to jazz. And and every time I think about that, I say, you know what? I have like Uncle Alvin was my uncle, and Uncle Maynard Chattis is my uncle, and like we have so many cousins that play music out of the Chattis family as well, like Mark and from my Dolio family, Carol and all of these people who are serious musicians. And then I'm, another part of it, with my mama's side, my cousin Elton, who played with IAQ with my dad, with my brother Kent. And then Kent and Elton also played with Mr. Marsalis because they were at, NOCA. Like Jamil played with Mr. Marsalis and all of these other people. Jamil and I went to NOCA together. So, you know, you grew up and you didn't realize that, as I realized that I grew up in the temple.
Yes.
I grew up in the actual temple of what music was supposed to be about. I had no restrictions as long as I practiced. I mean, you could do whatever you want to do. If you want to play classical, good. Because I know Jamil played classical because I heard him play classical music as well. Like my brother Marlon, solo with the symphony. Kent solo with the symphony. Actually, all of us in my family, and I think this is to be noted, every person in our family has soloed with the symphony who's a musician. My dad, myself, Stephanie, me, and Marlon. So, you know, we've all had our solos with the symphony. I mean, it's a Black family out of New Orleans, you know, that, you know, had an idea about what they wanted to do or what they wanted to be or just playing music. But because we, you know, I have other siblings who do other things, and oftentimes they don't get noted. But my brother Paul, the one he's talking about who played violin, thank God he stopped playing violin because he was driving me crazy. But he's an aerospace engineer. My brother Binky, we call him Binky, Edward Jordan Jr., is a historian. He has his own organization, WASET, Black History Society, you know, dealing with, you know, the real history of this world and that. My sister Tina, I consider a genius. She's, you know, studied French and she went away to school. She's a psychologist or studied psychology. She reads, you know, tons of books and has so many interesting ideas. And then of course, Stephanie, who, you know, has probably one of the best voices I've ever heard. And I mean, I can't stand that because it's gonna blow her head up because she, you know, me and her, we always have some kind of fight going on. And that's why on the new album with my dad, I mean, I didn't mean to do that, but on the new album, the title with between Marlon and the saxophone Eddie is Bickering Sisters, because Stephanie and I are so close in age that we always have some kind of conflict going on. And we always have some kind of thing, whether or not it's about our garden, like who has the best garden this year, or whose decorations for Christmas, you know, looks the best. I mean, it's you know, not a mean competition, but it's, you know, we like to, you know, do things as my mother did, like to make things beautiful, or like to just have this thing inside of us that we want to do to make our lives or our houses or whatever, you know, much more, much better. But, you know, we had this life that, as I'm thinking about it, because my friends are like, well, how did you come out, you know, this way positive and about your life? I said, well, I didn't realize it, but we had a lot of people who didn't have a lot of money, but they sure had a lot of culture. And they sure had a lot of books that they wanted us to read. And they had a lot of wisdom that they imparted to us through the stories. All the stories that you heard are all the same stories that I heard. And that's why New Orleans is one of the oldest non-broken living Black cultures in the world that people have. And I got that from Eric Waters, who's a photographer, and I have to give him credit because he was outside of New Orleans, you know, when Katrina hit, and he was in Atlanta, and he gave me the story about being at a, you know, talking to the lady who ran the African American Museum, and he said that, he said, you know, how you guys don't have a living, continuous Black culture.
Right.
And I said, you know what, you're absolutely right. New Orleans has the living culture. And that's why there's so many people who come out of the city. Because, and I was thinking about this because Ellis Marsalis, even though he went away, but he always came back. He always played his gig and he was always accessible. My dad, my brothers, they always have been accessible to the people of New Orleans. That's why so many of them have been able to get away. But in general, the thing that keeps us together is the fact that people come back because they love the people of New Orleans so much and they love their culture so much that they know that the line has got to be unbroken. And so we have this unbroken line, and that's what we have to really save and preserve with our New Orleans culture, with our Black culture, because we have connections to people from all over the world, from Jamaica to Cuba to Africa. And so that's what it is, that our line has not been broken.
You know what? That's a perfect soundbite. You know, our line has not been broken. And when you think about the different challenges that New Orleans has been faced with, even before Katrina, but just in general, even now with the pandemic and a lot of other things,
Right.
that culture stays, the embodiment of that culture, the resiliency of
Mm.
the people there. And that music, even though right now I know a lot of musicians aren't working, but that spiritual connection, going back to that melody and harmony, makes a big difference when you connect those dots for the overall spiritual picture of a lot of things that's happening with musicians. So, you were blessed. I was blessed to be in
Yeah.
a family and to have parents who embodied that culture and who continue to carry on that legacy in their children,
Right.
grandchildren, and their nieces and others. I mean, all of you all, my brothers and my son, and both my sons, they have that,
Right.
so it's a beautiful thing. And, even just speaking with you all, I mean, the history goes on and on. I'm sure there's so much more people who have influenced your lives. But I just find it just so fascinating, and I'm sure your siblings got some of the similar stories.
Yeah,
Oh yeah. No question. Go ahead, Dad.
she's right about that. She's right about that.
One of the things I like to end with, in addition to you all telling me, some words to end with, but what advice would you give musicians today? And I'm not just talking about jazz musicians. I'm talking about artists. You know,
Well,
I don't
number one,
looking at the I don't like using the word pandemic. I don't like using the
Right.
unprecedented, because none of this stuff is unprecedented. We've seen all kind of crazy stuff happen in our lifetime.
Right.
You've seen more stuff than we have. But moving forward, what type of advice would you give
you
a
got,
person?
you got to be true to your art. Come hell or high water, you got to do it.
That's
I
right.
would play music if they had to do it Katrina. It didn't matter to me. I'd get on a truck and play some music. I'd keep on practicing.
Right.
You, like Johnny Taylor said, you got to keep on keeping.
That's
And
right.
if you keep on keeping, the music going to develop. It's going to come from one thing to another. I remember when I was a kid, your father used to come out there with them little Dixieland bands. I'm from Crowley, Louisiana, and he'd be blowing up. And then later on, he went to Southern. I said, oh yeah, that's the same man who used to be from band. And I had a cousin that went to Southern, and he was in school with him. And said, yeah, you know it. I said, that's right. So all of that is a continuum. It's going to keep on going. The kids will have to understand that they didn't invent a certain thing, but it got better as the years went along. And it's going to get better because it's in the hands of some good musicians.
That's
Some
right.
people think they're the only one who can do this, but the music is in some good hands. But the people got to want to do it. You want to do it, and it's going to change. Everything must change, you know. And that's the main thing about music. It's going to change. Now, whether it's for the better or the worse, I don't know. That's like eating chocolate cake and eating some other. It's left up to the taste of the person. But the music is going to change. And everybody got a certain idea how things are supposed to go, for better or for worse. Beethoven doesn't sound like Bach. So Roy Brown doesn't sound like Enoch Brown. Charlie Parker don't sound like what they're doing now. And when Coltrane them got it, they just took it and went on with on that gold. It's gonna keep developing. And this is we look at all the beautiful cars. When they made a 38-mile Ford, they man, look at it. They got Cadillacs now. Make a 38 Ford look like a truck. You know, it's still developing. And it's the beautiful thing about the continuum. The continuum gonna keep on going. And it got to get better. So people are developing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You say,
What
right?
you asking me that question?
Yes, ma'am.
I you know, 'cause I straddle both worlds with classical and jazz. I mean, I'm really a classical musician, but my family forces me to go on stage. And recently, like I told my dad, I actually found myself actually improvising, which, because a lot of times it'd be like preparing and trying to get ready. And, oh man, it's just hair raising because, I'm used to, reading music or, having things memorized totally. And being on stage when all of a sudden you go blank and I'm like, oh man, and I'm playing jazz, oh my God. So you have to improvise, right? So it's a joke, that I'm always laughing about it. Like, when did you learn how to play jazz? I just learned today, which is pretty much true. Because every time I'm on the stage, I'm playing jazz because it's like so foreign to me. And everybody keeps saying, you sounded good. And I'm like, oh my God, have you heard my brothers or my dad or my sister? Now they completely immersed in that language. But for me, I think it is a spiritual calling. I've told my good friend Amy, I said, girl, this thing is a spiritual thing. Right. And it's like being a priest or being, a part of some kind of holy order that we are as musicians. Mm-hmm. And there's no rhyme or reason why we take all of the abuse that we do from some of our teachers, or, the kinds of things that we don't, people don't place value on what we do. But when you don't hear the music, then they say, wait a minute, where has the music gone? And it becomes exactly what Beethoven said, that, he took music over all philosophy, all everything. Right. It's the language that people can immediately communicate and understand. Mm-hmm. And it does not have to have some kind of translator for you to be able to feel it, understand it. So it goes where no other language or thought can kind of go, and also be at the same time where you can feel it and be a part of it. Yes. So I don't know where those concepts came from. I'm just saying this right now. And I'm saying those are the concepts that I learned by being in music. Oh, is that me? I'm sorry. Sorry, girl.
It's okay. Is anything in
Those are the concepts. I thought I turned it off. Those are the concepts that I learned from being in music. And so a lot of times I think people are upset because they're not making the kind of money that they want to make. Mm-hmm. But there's a way, I feel like this is what my mother has told me. She's like, you have a right to fail at anything. So the only thing that tells me is like, okay, good. I have a right to try this and fail, and then try something else and fail again. But maybe in that trying, I'm going to maybe find something out and figure out the right way to go. I just think that there's always options, and that there are many directions that a person can find. Like I said, I'm not a soloist on the stage, like those big time soloists, but I do have played solo. I play, chamber music. I play with my family. I record records. I'm having a life that a lot of people would want. And I'm recording, with people that I love and people who are fantastic musicians, because I'm saying all the time, not everybody can have all of this fame thing, and that comes with a price as well. I just want my piece of the pie. And I think that's a part of what now the awakening in the Black community is about, that people are saying, hey, we have always lived this way within ourselves. We've always been free. We've always had these ideas. We've always been smart. We've always been intelligent. We've always been doing all these things. It's just in the other communities, they've not recognized our true genius, and have not recognized the intelligence or the humanity and the compassion that we've had for people who have been oppressors to us. And that's the thing that has to come across, that the oppressors have to figure out what their oppression is about. Mm-hmm. And how much advantage they've had with this oppression. And they have to try to be like us, be sympathetic and empathetic, and change. Right. And understand that all people at any time have the capacity to be great. And so to young musicians, I tell them that, you cannot lose that thing that gets you up in the morning and makes you practice. You might not, be on the stage and playing solo with the New York Phil, but you can do other things that also satisfy you musically.
Yeah, you're right.
Amen. Amen to that. That is so true. Wow, y'all gave me a whole history lesson. Brought me back.
Girl, you funny.
Brought me back in time. I just love these conversations, especially because I'm not there in New Orleans eating no crawfish and hearing all kind of stuff.
Oh Lord, girl. Crawfish season almost over too. You know that, huh?
No, but it's okay. I'll figure it out some kind of way. Listen, I wanna humbly thank you both for being on the show. I greatly appreciate you and your family. I appreciate all of your contributions to everything that you do for the city, for humanity. You know, and so
You
thank you so much. I don't know if you all have any parting words before you leave.
I
Just hate to your family. You know how they say. I want to say hi to Jamil and the whole family because, you know, Jamil and I went to NOCA. But, you know, I just want to thank you for having me along with my dad. And I'm glad that you caught my dad because my dad still has so much that he can give, even at this point. You know what I mean?
I would love to do this.
And, the other good thing. The other thing is, like, look, we got a new album out. It's called Kidd Jordan. I got on the shirt, Last Train to New Orleans. And it's a album that, you know, like I said, that came out of nowhere. And I'm glad I was chosen to do this fluke kind of album that we recorded. And it's a great album. I mean, I just can't tell you, you just got to listen to it. But, you know, it's on, go to his website, go to my website, and you'll be able to hear some of it. But yeah, so that's the other thing. We have this new album out.
Of this piece, I'll make sure I'll lay it over if you don't mind.
Okay. Oh yeah, great. Yeah.
So send me that information and I'll make sure I include it in the lineup on this particular show. Definitely.
Great.
At some point, I would love to have the entire family. This whole collaboration of families, but just the history of your family and all of your siblings with your mom and dad. You know, I just think that's so beautiful to have that. So at some point we can think about that in the future. Okay?
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Listen, many blessings to you all.
Many blessings to you.
That's right. Thank you for putting this on tape.
What'd you say, Mr. Jordan?
Thank you for putting this on tape.
Oh, definitely, man. I'm excited about this. And Jamil is watching, I'm sure. Well, he's not watching now because it's not live. It's pre-recorded. Watch you later. So
Yeah.
he'll hear you giving him a shout out, Rachel.
Oh yeah, you know, that's my boy, huh?
Yes, I'll tell you. All right, my people. So I will talk to y'all later. Many blessings to you.
All right, thank you.
And blessings to you, girl.
Okay.
Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.